Over the last 50 years, Bangladesh-USA relationship enjoyed an enormous progress with mutual respect and cooperation. US's support is exemplary in many development and global issues. Bangladesh is world's one of the fastest growing economies and the fastest growing middle income countries. During the Liberation War in 1971, when Pakistani army started genocide and destruction, the then US President Richard Nixon and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger were supporting the marauding Pakistani army regime. But the peace-loving people, along with politicians across the aisles, journalists, academicians, longshoremen with real American spirit, went against their own government. First time in the American history, they changed the foreign policy of their own government by non-violent movement. The Bangladesh concert were held in New York to help the cause of emerging Bangladesh, which was the beginning of the concept of aid concert for a charitable cause. Bangladesh people are so proud of such heroic activities by many such friends of Bangladesh. Our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina hosted beautiful events and honored many foreign friends in Bangladesh. There are so many people participated in the struggle in USA. Today, we remember them with gratitude. Symbolically today, we'll show our appreciation to three of our friends who are present among us. Dr. David Nellin had deep connection with Bengali culture and the people. Before Liberation War, he worked from 1967 to 1970 at the Cholera Research Laboratory, now called ICDDRB in Dhaka, where he led the team that developed oral rehydration therapy, credited by WHO with saving well over 60 million lives globally to date. Following the March 25, 1971 massacre, Dr. Nellin co-founded Bangladesh Information Center, BDIC, in Washington, D.C., which coordinated U.S. congressional lobbying to stop arms shipment to Pakistan and support Bangladesh independence. The BDIC worked closely with Bangladesh patriots who had resigned from the Pakistani embassy in Washington in protest against the 1971 atrocities. After the liberation, BDIC lobbied Congress for recognition and aid for the newly independent nation. The BDIC archives have been preserved at the Widener Library at Harvard University and are available to scholars. A new book by Sam Jaffe titled An Internal Mirror has documented American grassroots efforts on behalf of Bangladesh during the independence struggle. Returning to Bangladesh on January 2, 1972, Dr. Nellin was present at Tejgah Airport on January 10, when Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman returned to Dhaka. He met Sheikh Mujib later at Banga Bhavan and presented him with a compilation of BDIC documents. He is the recipient of the Friends of Bangladesh War honor from Sheikh Hasina, in addition to recognition from numerous US Bangladeshi organizations. David Weisbrod. In 1971, he was a 24-year-old graduate student, having returned from a 2-year stint as a Peace Corps volunteer in Nepal. While in graduate school, he had written a series of editorials criticizing American policy towards Pakistan. These editorials captured the attention of Bangladesh Information Center, which at that time was looking for a full-time staff to lead the lobbying initiative on Capitol Hill. When approached, he dropped out of the graduate school to join as the co-head of the center. The struggle of the Bengalis against Pakistan oppression struck him as a rare moral issue that called him to action. Kaiser Zaman, a Bengali refugee with experience in relief work, during Cyclone Bhola, became co-head with him. They worked very well together and were an effective team. He focused squarely on the lobbying campaign, presenting moral, political, humanitarian perspective as to why a change in US foreign policy is America's best interest. In addition to Kaiser and him, approximately 15 regular volunteers and a broader network of dozens of semi-regular volunteers from pro-Bangladesh organizations around the country worked to support the center's lobbying program. The heart of the campaign was to promote the passage of the Saxby Church Amendment to the Foreign Assistance Act, whose aim was to curtail economic and military aid to Pakistan. Their approach was bipartisan, and again, they're fortunate that both Republican and Democratic senators and congressmen were responsive to the message. In the end, the lobbying efforts were successful. Saxby Church was adopted in the Senate, and together with the Gallagher Amendment in the House of Representatives, the Foreign Assistance Act was amended and signed into law by President Richard Nixon. For his part, the work was incredibly inspiring. Each day for him was a good day when Bangladesh was recognized as an independent nation in April 1972. The work of the Bangladesh Information Center came to a happy ending. He wrote at that time, just about all of the immediate points which drew people to this cause have now been resolved, and in a sense, the Bangladesh Information Center, as it was originally formed, has now attained nirvana. After independence, he was selected by the International Rescue Committee to be its representative in Dhaka, where he served with pride, knowing that the future of Bangladesh was now in the hands of its people, and that a new and more promising chapter in the relationship between Bangladesh and USA could now unfold. Thank you. Leo Levin. He said, when Bengal suffered a catastrophic hurricane and flood in 1970, I donated my time and a television commercial in order to raise money for the victims of the disaster. At that time, I was introduced to the kindness and warmth of the Bengali people. Later, when George Harrison's wonderful film raised America's conscience regarding their 1971 War of Independence and showed the world what horrors had been inflicted on Bengali people by the West Pakistan, I felt that I must also join the fight for the independence in whatever way that I could. I suspended my regular filmmaking business and decided to produce, direct, and photograph a film that would raise money and awareness regarding the fierce war and the plight of millions of refugees that had left East Bengal for safety in India. I gathered a small crew, lots of film, and flew to India. Once there, we connected with a wonderful group of patriotic musicians led by Benur Rahman that wished to tour the many refugee camps and try to bring hope and solace to the battered survivors who had fled the Pakistani onslaught. We transported them for weeks and eventually took the troop across the river into the land that was to become Bangladesh. There they entertained Mukti Bahini and had first-time look what these valiant soldiers were up against. I went out on patrols with the fighters and tried as best I could to record their determination and bravery. It was not pretty. After 8 weeks, I felt that I had almost collected enough material for a film, but I was anxious to ride with the troops into Dhaka on a final day of the victory. However, I ran afoul of Madame Gandhi, who was spreading her own contribution to the war effort. She did not want any Americans around, especially since my country was arming and aiding the other side of the battle. She locked my crew and I up for a few days and then banished us from her country. I wanted our film entitled Joy Bangla to be feature-length and run in theaters, and I spent too much time trying to make it perfect. Unfortunately, by the time the editing was finished, Bangladesh had not only become an independent nation, but Sheikh Mujibur Rahman had been deposed, and the military had changed the face of the nation. No one would distribute Joy Bangla. It was characterized as yesterday's news. Before I left my country, my very wise and prophetic wife, Raquel, had cautioned me that I should make my film 10 minutes long and get it on TV in the state as soon as possible. I have learned to always listen to her since then. The film and the 40,000 feet of footage that went into making Joy Bangla lived in tin cans in my basement for over 20 years, until Tariq and Catherine Masood found me. They convinced me to give them all that I had done so that they might make their own version of Bangladesh War of Independence and recall the nation's moment of greatness and what freedom and independence had meant. They charmed me completely, and I gave them every bit of film, sound, and still photos that I had. They worked assiduously for almost 5 years and crafted their wonderful film, Muktir Gaan. I could not have been prouder of my relationship with these two brilliant filmmakers who became my dearest friends. How the two finally brought so much of my imagery and their wisdom and commentary to the people all over the world never ceases to impress me. I always felt Tariq was like younger brother and Catherine, the sister that I never had. My heart breaks each time I think of how such a great human being as Tariq had his life cut so short. Catherine, however, carries on their work and nurtures their son, who will someday perhaps carry on their tradition of humanism and artistry. I consider my connection to the people of Bangladesh stronger today than it has ever been. And as an American, I feel blessed to have become joined with and honored by such a great Indian people, their country, their culture, and their warmth. Thank you.